welcome to Conscious Pathways, the podcast where we explore the intersection of education and social justice through transformative conversations. I'm your host, Brittany, and I am so happy and honored that you are tuning in today. My voice is still healing, so I'm getting over just a little bit of a cold, and it's gonna take a minute. So we're just gonna deal with my voice sounding just a little bit wonky over these next couple of episodes. So thank you for bearing with me. I'm so excited to share this conversation with you. I got to have a wonderful conversation with a creator that I have followed probably for a couple of years now, and I absolutely love her content. It is such a raw and real look at what teachering is, what motherhood is. She's just a fantastic human, and I just love all the raw vulnerability that she shows on the internet, which is great. So I'm actually joined by Mrs. Frazzled, or aka Ariel, but we call her Mrs. Frazzled. She is a former kindergarten teacher. Her videos have evolved from kind of taking this humorous look at motherhood, current events, mental health, education, and all the ways that it intersects. Her podcast, Teacher Quit Talk, which if you haven't listened, you should definitely listen. It is hilarious, is her latest attempt to humanize teachers by shedding a light on the teacher exodus and the many reasons why teachers step away from the field and what, if anything, could really win them back. Like I said, she is a fantastic human being. I am so excited to share our conversation. We talked a lot about just social media, the implications of social media. We talked about transitional kindergarten and kindergarten, as well as voice and choice in early care and learning. And I'm just really excited about sharing this. So let's hop into that episode. Hello, and welcome to Conscious Pathways.
Hello.
So excited. I am joined by Miss Frazz, aka Ariel, or also Ariel, aka Miss Frazzled.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited that you're joining me. I've talked to like one other person that I found on like TikTok and social media before, and I'm just always so excited whenever I get to reach out to someone. And I think I started following your TikTok or your TikTok content back in probably like 2020. So...
Oh my gosh. That was in the infancy. That's so cool. Thank you.
Yes.
What an honor.
I think that was like when I first joined TikTok, and I was kind of like a little bit later to the game because I was so resistant. Like every time there's a new social media, I am so resistant. Like when Facebook came out, I was like, I don't want it.
Oh, I remember that. Oh my goodness. You like yanked that from the depths of my memory. I remember being like, it's not like MySpace.
Right?
Like MySpace is so much better.
But it kind of was.
I know, it really was, especially then.
Like it had music. Yeah. I could do my top 5. Like it was, you know.
Yes.
But I'm kind of glad. Like I
so
say this all the time, but I'm so glad that MySpace just kind of disappeared because it was like no one needs to be exposed to like my preteen thoughts. Like that is.
Oh my gosh. No, I'm so with you. My digital footprint evaporating from that time in my life.
Yes.
Like, it's not like I was posting anything crazy or bad. It just was like a lot of like oversharing and taking
100%.
a lot of like those quizzes that you would post to the bulletins that was just very in depth and personal. And I'm like, you know what? We're good with not having that on the internet anymore.
So good with just not having that part of my brain, my not even close to being fully formed brain, just exposed to the internet. Now I'm glad I got to practice with MySpace, and when I got to Facebook, I was like, okay, I'm like a little bit more savvy now.
Yes, we worked out a little bit of the mishaps and the missteps, and now we're a little grown up, you know? Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. I still think I need to go through and scrub my Facebook because I did have it when I was like a freshman or something in high school.
Oh, yeah.
And so there are still like teenage thoughts on there that I'm like, self.
Yeah, come on. We don't need to be sharing about all that on the internet. Yeah, I'll go through my like on this day memories, and it's like sometimes I'm just like set to only me.
Yes.
It's an inside thought.
Those are inside thoughts. Yes, there were a lot of inside thoughts that were being on the outside that I was like, okay, you know what? Let me just lock this down a little
Yeah,
bit.
social media is funny that way.
Yes, yes, it is very funny that way. But yeah, I think I started following you back in March of 2020, and I also like I just didn't know that there was like a teacher social media thing happening. Like I knew about Pinterest,
I
and like I
had
was like,
no clue.
I had no idea. And so once I found teachers on
I
TikTok, I was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing.
Yes, it was amazing because I feel like I was seeking I wanted community. Like I wanted after
Yes.
being sent home and like all the uncertainty that was March
Mm.
2020, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I really would love to meet other teachers going through the same thing just outside of my community." Obviously, my teacher friends, we were talking about it, but I downloaded TikTok because I wanted to see the Savage dance. I was I really want to know what this is all about. And then I was scrolling and I really quickly found teachers and I was like, well, hey, this is perfect.
Yes, yes. Oh my God, the Savage Dance. That just unlocked some sort of core memory. That was early 2020 madness.
Yes.
Yes, there was like
Oh
the
my
Savage
gosh.
Dance. There was Tiger King. There was a lot of that happening
Oh,
on
yeah.
TikTok.
Oh my goodness. And the whipped coffee
Oh my
and
goodness.
just baking bread. There were so many things
There were
that were
so many
happening
things.
on.
And it's just funny now to see how TikTok has shifted because I'll see things on TikTok in my little TikTok sphere and I'll go talk to my friends and they're like, I've literally never seen that a day in my life. And I'm like, but
Yes.
it's all I see.
Yeah, I know. That's why it's so much when people are like telling me about what's on their For You page.
Hmm.
Sometimes I'm like, I think you're self reporting right now and you don't even realize that you're
Yeah.
telling me a lot of information about
Yes.
what's going on with you
Yes.
because the algorithm is downright creepy. Like
It
it
is.
knows way too much.
It
So if
does.
you're like telling me certain things, I'm like, how did it get on your For You page all the time?
Oh, yep, yep, yep. And that's you talk about all the time too, but I just feel like that's what kind of makes me concerned for like younger generations because we've had a lot of experience working with the algorithm. And so like I've been able to curate my algorithm to show me what I want it to show me. And sometimes it's like, do you
Yes.
want to see this? I'm like, no, no, I don't want to see that. Bring me back to what I told
Mm-mm.
you to show me. Just these things. Um, but if you're
Yes.
not being mindful about it, you'll go in all these other kind of directions and it'll show you things that you just don't want to and need to be seeing. It's wild.
Yes. And I feel like it amplifies so many things that go on in our brain. And when I think about what I was like as a school age student or a
Mm-hmm.
teenager, if I had access to something that could like amplify the deepest insecurities and inner mechanisms of my mind, I
Mm-hmm.
don't know that it would have been great for me. I was
Yes.
thinking about this recently because there's a lot of initiatives coming out about social media and people under 18
Mm-hmm.
and in the context of how they use social media and how the algorithm caters to them. And I'm just at first I was like, I mean, I handled the internet. Maybe it's fine. And then I really looked into it and thought about it and I was like, "Oh, this is not your mama's MySpace or Facebook
No.
anymore. Like this is a different monster."
It really is. It's a whole other monster. And I've seen more people talk about it and more people saying like, hey, this is concerning, especially for young people on just being exposed to the internet and how often young people are on the internet. And it's a lot. And in my realm of teaching, so I come from a preschool background. um Social media is not really too much of a thing that they're concerning themselves with.
Yeah.
At least not
Yeah.
yet. But it's something that they are getting exposed to younger and younger and younger, and especially just being exposed to just media in general. So there's a lot of conversations that I'm hearing us have out there, which it gives me hope because I'm like, okay, we're talking about it. We're getting people who are more knowledgeable about these things than me out there advocating for the children because it's important and it is very concerning out there.
Yeah, it really is. I really appreciate like all the discourse that's been going into it. And I feel
Mhm.
like on a lot of areas, I'm seeing educators or unions leading the charge on this. And I'm like, wow, that's very telling that the teachers are like on the front lines of the social media issue, being like, hey, we're noticing this in our classrooms and we want to do something about it. I mean, with so many things, if we listened to teachers, we would not be in so many of the situations that we are in right now. So I hope
Accurate.
that we get to the right ears.
Yes, yes, please. And speaking of teachers and teaching, one question I always like to ask is who or what inspired you to join the realm of teaching, and specifically why early childhood?
It's so interesting when I get this question because I remember so vividly I wanted to be a teacher when I was in preschool. I had a really awesome preschool teacher, and I just loved her to pieces. And I said, I want to teach the big kids, which at the time that would have been kindergarten when I was in preschool. And I had a really awesome kindergarten teacher, and I really enjoyed that era of my own education. And then oh, my dog's crying. Sorry. She's fine. Everything's fine. But when I decided to go into teaching, I started teaching in 2009. I was teaching little baby dance and theater classes. It was just the demographic that I started with, and I always really enjoyed and felt that that was like the best fit from my personality. I think that everybody has their strengths, and I just got really lucky that I was always working with what I felt was like my wheelhouse. And then when I would step outside of early education, I'd be like, I don't really know what I'm doing so much.
Oh no, it's okay.
So yeah. But I guess who I was inspired by, I mean, I think I'm just like a mosaic of like every teacher that I've ever loved and like every educator friend I've ever had that I learned or picked up things from. So yeah.
I love that. And I feel like having that background in, you know, theater and drama, and I was also in drama club, and then I did marching band, which is essentially a drama club but outside. And I feel like that having that background, like it helped me in my teaching so much because like yeah, of course I can just like sing and dance in front of these little dudes. Like nothing really matters. Like it's fine.
Right? This is my stage, everyone.
Yes.
Welcome to the show.
Yes. Yes. I have them all on circle time on the rug, and I'm like, okay, I am on stage now. Let's do what you do.
Let's do it. I love it.
It is so fun. But yeah, I feel like that just helped me as a teacher and helped me to just not take everything so seriously and not be so like I just wasn't embarrassed when I was like just in front of the students. Like that first day when you walk in that classroom and they're all looking at you with their little eyes and you're like, oh, okay.
Oh my gosh.
I am the knowledgeable person, I guess.
No, I'll never forget that moment when the door shut on the first day of my first day of teaching. And I was like, okay, I am the teacher. I am going to do this. Well, here we go.
Yeah. When I look back on that, I was like, oh, baby teacher me was so bad. But she was learning. She was learning.
Yes. Yes. I was the same way.
Yeah. Because I hadn't with early childhood in California, so again, I still don't know how like this was possible for me to do this, but like I started in the classroom and I hadn't even taken my child development classes yet. Like I was registered for them, but I hadn't like started them yet. So I was just like a person in this classroom.
I know. It's so funny sometimes when I really think about the requirements and stuff and I'm like, "Oh, I was just allowed. Okay, well." They were like, "You have the intention in the right place. You're headed the right direction. You're good. Go ahead.
You got
Give
this.
it a shot. Why not?
Yeah, go have fun."
We believe in you."
And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, they believe in me, so this must be good, right? And I look back on that, I'm like, was that the choice we should have made? But I loved it. I had a good time, so I was like, I love this. I want to teach forever. now that I've gotten my bachelor's and my master's, and I know a thing or two now about education. And so now I'm a little bit different in the classroom. But I look back on baby teacher me and I'm just like, oh, well, she was learning. Her intentions were
I
there.
know. I know. I had an IA that year that she had worked for years with a very, very experienced kindergarten teacher, like just like the best of the best. And then she got me. And I was a very new little teacher, and I had really good intentions, but there were just moments when like I didn't know what I didn't know,
Yep,
and
yep,
I
yep.
feel like I was also, not to go back to social media, but I was also very into teacher Instagram at the time, and
Mm,
I wanted to be a teacher. Like, not, I wasn't on social media in that way, but I wanted to be like those teachers.
yes.
But that you just can't be. And
No.
you realize really quickly that, like, oh, this isn't like necessarily a full picture of
Mm-hmm.
what you do in the classroom every day. I mean, there's a lot more paperwork than was shown at the Ron Clark Academy, which I was like
Mm-hmm.
binging their content 24/7, and I was like, this is the peak. This is the mountaintop. And I'm like filling out paperwork and grade books, and I'm like, this takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
This is sucking into my experiential learning time, friends.
Yep.
But
Yep.
so that was fun to go through that. And then when I like became a social media person, I remember like taking a mental vow where I was like, I will not just show the shiny happy good parts of teaching. Like, I really want to be not necessarily all doom and gloom, but like I
Yeah.
really want to be honest about the
Mm-hmm.
experience, because I think there is so much joy in teaching, but we do ourselves and others a disservice if we're only talking
Yes.
about the happy parts.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Um, because I don't want people to feel like I did, where I was like, am I failing?
Mm.
Like, am I doing a really bad job? It's like, no, girl, you're just a first year teacher.
Yes.
Like, you're just a baby teacher.
Yes. Yes. Like you said, you don't know what you don't know. And part of that comes with the experience of, having a couple of classrooms under your belt and you're like, okay, I've learned a lot now. And, taking some
Mm-hmm.
classes and just learning about the developmental age that you're working with. And there's so much beauty that comes in that. And like, going to school and then also working, and like all those things work in tandem, right? Because you can go to all the school in the world and still not be a great first year teacher, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, yes, it's good for us to know theory. Yes, it's good for us to know all these really great things, but actually being in the classroom is a whole other set of worms that you gotta deal with.
Yes, so much learning happens in that first
It
year.
does.
So much
Yes,
learning.
yes. And sometimes, especially in early childhood, you just kind of get thrown into it. So you don't always have like a mentor that you're working with. You don't always have, someone who you're kind of specifically like learning from. You just kind of see a teacher that you like and you're like, I'm gonna do what you do. I'm just gonna follow
Yes,
your direction.
absolutely. Yes. Yeah, that's so true.
Yes, yes. And so it's a lot of learning and it's a lot of growing those first couple years, but it's worth it. And then once you get more years under your belt and you've done it for a couple years and you've kind of worked a little bit, then you start learning and then you start working with parents more, and that's a whole other thing that you got to learn to navigate. Is working with parents and then
Oh, yeah.
navigating all the other things like your admin, and then your teaching staff, and then your students, and then your students' families and the community. There's all these other things that are vying for your attention. So yes, I agree that I never really connected with the Instagram teaching profiles or like the Pinterest teaching profiles, because it didn't it didn't connect with me with what I was actually in the classroom experiencing. And
Yes. Oh my gosh.
yes. And so when I find, content like yours, like it was just so real, and it's like, oh my God, yes. Like I might not have the same like kindergarten experience teaching, but teaching preschool, I was just like, oh my God, this is so real. Like this is a real person showing me what it looks like, and I feel so seen. I feel so
Oh my
validated.
gosh. I appreciate that. That means like literally the world to me, because that's like the kind of stuff that I always look for in content too, where I'm like trying to
Yes.
find people that kind of are like-minded and align with my experiences and my beliefs and
Mm-hmm.
just the things I aspire to be as an educator. And like when I see people talking about having like a 12 student class, I'm like, wow, we
Mm-hmm.
might be on different planets right now, actually.
Yeah. 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 I've experienced that. So like I got to experience to work at one of my dream schools, and we had low class sizes. We had like it was this Reggio, it was very
Amazing.
play based. That was like my
Heck
dream school.
yeah.
Yes. And so being able to do that, like just my I feel like my teaching skills grew so much because I had, the
Yeah.
ability to grow in that way. But I've also had the experience where I'm working
Mm-hmm.
in early childhood, and you got two teachers and 24 kids in a classroom, and it's like, "Oh, okay." And 24 3-year-olds in one classroom is chaos. Like you could be a really great teacher, you could be a disciplinarian, you could be whatever it is. It is still chaos when you have that many 3-year-olds just
Yeah.
trying to learn
Yes,
together.
and they're trying to learn how to be people.
They're
Like
trying to
I
learn
call
how to
them
be
puppy
people.
people at the
Yeah.
beginning of the year, because it reminds me when you look at a litter of puppies and they're like
Mm-hmm.
crawling over each other.
Yeah.
I'm like, that is the vibe in the
It is.
space right now.
It is the vibe. It's the vibe and the experience, and I feel that so much. Um, so I know right now you're not currently in the classroom, but I do want to pick your brain a little bit about TK. So that's been something that's been rolling out in California the past like year or so. Do you know much about it? Do you have a thought on TK? I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, so I actually taught a combo TKK class. So
Wow.
at my first school, there was a designated TK classroom,
Mm,
and then those kids would come up, and that class would be distributed among the 4 kindergarten classes.
mm,
And then at my second school, we had TKK combo, and you would
mm.
pretty much the protocol of the school that was to teach it the same way. Like you basically differentiate just like you differentiate for any other students, but you're not like specifically pulling your TK students, if that
Got
makes
it.
sense,
Okay.
to like be in a different small group or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
then at the end of the year, you evaluate whether the students will skip kindergarten and go straight to
Oh.
first grade, or if they will basically go to a different class and do kindergarten again,
Okay.
which
Got
I
it.
thought was a really interesting way to do it.
Yeah.
So that was my experience with TK, and
Mm-hmm.
it's been on my mind a lot recently just because I've seen the discourse in the news and seeing it become more mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's every child is so different at this age.
Mm,
And it's like, I think what's important to me is that students have the access and that families have the choice to do what they think
yes.
is best for their kids, because I think like the access is everything. And then like once you have that, then families individually can be like, look at their child and say, okay, are you are you ready for kinder? Are you gonna do, what do they call it? Red shirting? Where they
Red
hold them
shirting.
back from kindergarten for 1 year. I
Oh.
saw this I was watching like a mommy TikTok, and
Mm,
somebody said that in the context of keeping your child home and sending them to kindergarten a year later. And I was like,
interesting.
is that like a sports reference? I don't know.
I don't know.
But anyway, I don't know. So there's so many different ways that you can take early education. Um, and they're so individualized, but then at the same time, it's like if you don't have a choice, then you don't have
Mm-hmm.
the ability to even get that far, you know?
Yes, yes. And I love that you brought up that voice and choice because, one of the great things, well, so since we switched in California to TK, for now, it used to be just a small subsect of, 4-year-olds who qualified for TK. And so now it kind of doesn't matter on your birthday, but now all 4-year-olds are eligible for TKs. And now they're looking at early TK. So they're looking at incorporating something for all 3-year-olds, which is a whole other topic that I have strong feelings about. But it's basically a year of free education for your students, because we know that early childhood programs tend to be very expensive. So unless you qualify for Head Start or state funded,
Yes.
um, you're usually paying a large amount of money out of pocket to fund early care for your child. And so TK, it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
connected to the school district, so you get free education for your students. So it kind of puts a lot of families in this bit of a bind of, do I continue paying for childcare? Especially like middle class families are the ones who are mostly getting kind of stuck in this like bubble of,
Yeah.
it's expensive to pay for childcare, and it's expensive to pay for this private preschool that we're going to. We could do TK, but then at the same time, is TK developmentally appropriate for this particular child? Some kids will do it and some kids will thrive. Some
Right.
kids will do it and that is just not their optimal learning environment, and they're like 4. So it's
Right.
hard. And a lot of parents don't actually have the choice, right? And you know, that is where we
Mm-hmm.
get these like problems that are popping up. Like, it should be an option if you feel like your child would thrive in a more structured school environment, and that's something that is good for that child. Like, as a parent, you're going to know what your child will thrive in. And you're like, oh yeah, my child, they love organization, they love structure, they love this, they're going to thrive in this type
Right.
of environment. And some kids just don't. And
No, and I have been running into that with my kid. I'm like, it's because the TK programs, from what I've seen in my area,
mhm,
it's very, very academically rigorous. And as an early
yes,
educator, I do not align with that
yes,
for almost any child. I think that children can adapt and can thrive in a very academic setting, but I
mm-hmm,
do not think it's innate to them. I don't think that that is hardwired into their
yes,
being. And when I go tour a site and I notice that all of the 4-year-olds are sitting, or not 4-year-olds, all the 2 and 3-year-olds are sitting
mm-hmm,
there very peacefully with their hands folded,
yeah,
attending to a lesson, I'm like, uh-oh.
yeah,
How'd you do that?
yeah,
What'd you do to make them do that? Because I wonder how I agree or disagree with however you made them do that.
yes.
Um, but my child is very, I just don't think it's going to be an academic setting for her at an early age. I don't,
Mm-hmm.
and that's not, I mean, maybe that's partially me being like, I just disagree with it, and partially her, I don't
Yeah,
know.
I think
But
it's
it's
a good
so tough.
combination
Oh,
of
so
both. Yeah.
yeah, I fell off the rails of what I was going to say as per usual, but I, sorry,
No
I was
worries.
going to say the more play-based environments are very, very expensive, and the
Yes.
TK academic environments are the ones that are more covered by uh, like public assistance or
Mm-hmm.
grants or what have
Mm-hmm.
you, the state covers.
Yep.
And I'm like, I don't know, I don't like that.
Yes. Yes. It's
Because I
tricky.
love Reggio. Like, you mentioned Reggio, and
I love
I like
Reggio.
love.
Love.
Oh,
Love Reggio.
could talk about it all day.
Yes. Me and Reggio, we're homies. We're good buddies.
Oh, love it.
Because it's like,
Yeah, it's the best.
it's the best. And I feel like, the play-based environments and the continuation of care and just the things that we're able to do in that environment are so beautiful and wonderful. But I also recognize that the type of families that were in this program were more affluent, like upper middle class families that can afford the costs that are associated with a more play-based program and all the kind of things that are offered. Whereas like if you're a family who is low income, or if you're a family below the poverty line, you're not going to really be able to afford that. And I've had the
Mm-hmm.
opportunity of working with both state funded and private preschools and family run daycares as well. And you know the more state funded ones, they do have to appease their funders. So it's gonna be a little bit more rigorous. There's gonna be a lot more things that they have to do, a
Mm-hmm.
lot more paperwork, a lot more expectations on like where they want the students to be. And there are elements of wanting it to be play based, but it's not going to be fully play based just because there's just so many other
Right.
things that the state is going to want to see from those students. And so TK has been like a kind of a big conversation, especially as we're looking at, universal pre-K and transitional kindergarten, and what does that look like? And so I love talking to people about it because I'm just so curious about how the rollout is going. I've seen some, TK classrooms, and it seems like it's been a struggle since it's been all 4-year-olds. Because before it was like
Mm-hmm.
you had to be kind of like an older 4-year-old for TK, and
Yes.
so now it could be like
Mm-hmm.
I was 3 yesterday, and now I'm 4, and I'm in TK, and just
Right. It's
because
a
you turned
lot.
4 does not mean that you have behavior of 4 yet. That takes time.
Right. Oh, 100%. I mean, it is so different. And people always make fun of parents because we will refer to our children as like months for a long time. Sometimes a little too long, I will admit. But in moments like that, you do really see it
Yes.
where you're like a beginning of 4-year-old versus an
Mhm.
end of 4-year-old.
Yep.
Those are different.
Those
Very
are different.
different.
Those are very, very, very different. And especially if you haven't had, a background. I know a lot of people who teach early education within the K through 12 system have had experience working with, preschool students, but a lot of them haven't. And so if you're new to this super early age range, right, like fresh 4-year-old, again, that's going to be different than a 5-year-old. The things they can do is going to be different. Their abilities are going to be different. Um, and so if you're working with, these, like, if you've been working with, fifth graders, if you've been working with third graders, and now you're suddenly working with TK, it's a whole different realm.
Mm-hmm.
they will,
Mm-hmm.
they will ring you.
They will.
They will.
They will. They do.
Yes, yes, yes. They are still sweet baby angels, but they are just a whole different breed because they're young. They're just a lot younger. The things their attention spans just are a lot shorter. And so it means that you're just on for however many hours that you were in that classroom with those students. You are just, the flip is on, the switch is on. Like, you do not go off at any time.
Yes.
And it's a
And the
struggle.
curriculum really isn't geared towards that age group yet.
No.
So the curriculum that I would use for my kindergartners is not inherently appropriate
Mm-hmm.
for my TK students. And we were there from 7:15 to 4:15 every day. I mean, that
That's a
is
lot.
a long day, even though there was a nap time
Mm-hmm.
they're just babies.
They
They're not
are.
meant to attend to learning that long. They're
No.
just it's and then the curriculum not being necessarily suited towards them.
Mm-hmm.
Like those are the things that make me feel like bummed out about it. And I um you can differentiate, you can pull small groups, you can do all these things to accommodate and modify that are so important, but at the same time it's like should they even be asked to be in that space? I don't know.
Yes. Yes. And I always go back to, is this developmentally appropriate? When I'm looking at the developmental age of who I'm working with, right? Are my expectations in alignment with that? And also, in addition to that, right? So not only like developmental age where they are now, but also a lot of these students have had a lot of disruptions within, 2020 wasn't even that long
Mhm.
ago, right? So like a lot of them have
Oh,
had these
no. Yeah.
disruptions. There's just been a lot going on. And so I need to also consider, that when I'm thinking about developmentally where they are, because there were significant gaps in, their early years. And so, where
Mhm.
they come to me developmentally might not be exactly where I'm expecting them to be. And so that means I need to modulate where my expectations are. What can I reasonably expect for this group of children that I have right now, right here, right now? And it's tricky and
Right.
it's hard. And so in early childhoods, but in preschool, like I'm able to do that. I'm able to modulate that. I'm able to kind of create my curriculum the way I need it to be for the students I have now. But that's not always the case when you go through kind of the more school district. They usually kind of have it set out for you of, no, this is what I want to see from
Right.
them at the end of this. And so it's a little bit harder then to do that.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's really hard. And I do, there's also an element of like, I don't know that school districts really understand TK themselves
Yes.
as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
When I was going back to school to teach, I was originally going to return after my maternity leave
Mm-hmm.
after Thanksgiving. And so I went and sat in my classroom, and the teacher that was retiring before me was talking about all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, did they consult you at all? Because she was like a 30-year veteran teacher. And she said, no, they didn't talk to any of us before they set up our classrooms this way or implemented such and such. And I was just like, wow, what a wealth of knowledge that the school district could have been pulling from that they're just not. And that is so frustrating. So she was like, that was the year I decided to retire, because I was just like, you know what? I think I'm tapped out. I'm good. I'm done. This has been it for me. But I think that does a disservice to our students as well, because we could be asking these experts, hey, what do you think?
Yes.
And they're just not. They're just saying like, oh, we kind of know what kids do. So TK will be like this, and it's just, I wish there was more cross collaboration going on.
Yes, that cross collaboration. Because when they started doing the rollout, I started to attend some of these meetings, and at the time, I was outside the classroom, so I was working a little bit remotely, so I could attend some of these kind of public meetings that they would have regarding TK when they were kind of really just rolling out the universalness of it. And I was like, okay, but these meetings are like at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. What teacher is going to be able to
Brittany,
take the time out of their teaching day?
And what parent?
And what, like, who is this for?
Right. It drives me absolutely bonkers.
Yes.
It's like, and when I was doing my class last semester for my master's program, I did a whole project on family involvement and engagement, and the way that families are systematically excluded from these conversations. And it feels very on purpose. Because it probably is on purpose. Like, nobody's outright saying, hey, guess what? We're doing this to be sneaky. But there's a whole lot of evidence that they are being sneaky. And I don't like it. It makes me so mad, because I hate when people, school districts, whatever, come into a community and say, this is what you need and this is how we're going to do it, with no outside input from teachers, community members, parents, stakeholders in that realm.
Community.
I'm just like, yes, it's like you are a neighborhood school in a lot of cases, right? Like my school was. So meaning that the students that attend that school live in that neighborhood, and you are not going to invite the neighborhood to talk about it? Like, what do you mean? You're the meeting's at 1 p.m.
Right?
Oh, it makes me so mad.
It was so
And they're like, here's the minutes.
Yeah.
We emailed you the minutes.
Yeah.
I'm like,
here's the recording.
Okay, well,
like, that's great.
Oh, jeez Louise.
Where do I put my input?
Yeah.
Like, it's great that I
Here's
have it.
the Google form.
Yeah.
We might read it. We might not.
We might read it. We might not. And that's kind of been the frustration of this whole rollout these last couple of years, is that there hasn't been a whole lot of input from early childhood educators. So like the preschool teachers, there hasn't been a lot of input. There hasn't been a lot of input from the K-12 teachers. And it's just like a thing that's kind of happening. And like, I don't know what the input from the actual parents is looking like. And so they just kind of roll the thing out. They're like, oh yeah, like this is good. Like people want to have universal pre-K. And yes, we did want that. Yeah. We did not want it this way.
Right. It's like we want, like oftentimes TK is free and through the public education system. Yes. Amazing. Free. I've been asking for free public education for early education students for years. Yes. But we did it in maybe the worst way sometimes. Like just like and this is what I mean. Like people always ask me, like, what do you mean when you say like teaching is political? Because I have like shirts with that and stuff. These are the kind of issues that I'm talking about. It's like education being tangled up with these political, social, and cultural contexts, and then people imposing these things because there's a school board that votes but doesn't really ask for any input or offer any meaningful times to receive feedback or input. And then it's just like the fact that teaching and learning and the decisions within our educational system are not neutral. They're fully influenced by broader political ideologies and power dynamics and societal structures. It's like these schools are like little microcosms of what goes on in the greater community, in the greater world around us. And it's like, I just want to like yell it from the rooftop sometimes, that it's like,
Yes.
like you said, it's like, not like this.
Not like this.
Yes, we want that, but not like this, please.
Exactly.
Listen to teachers.
Listen to the teachers.
Listen to community members.
Yes, please. And like, as they rolled it out, I started going to the family child care collective meetings as well, and they were like, this is concerning. Like, that's a large percentage of our base. Like, our students are going to be 4 and 5-year-olds, because like infants and toddlers, I mean, if you look at it just from like a purely like money perspective, which is not what everyone's looking at, but from that purely money perspective, right? You can only have so many infants and toddlers in your program. Like, with ratios, you can't have like 24 toddlers, and you just can't do that.
Right.
So it's like the ratios are a lot smaller for infants and toddlers. So if you're a family-run daycare, you can only have so many of them, and so most of your income really is going to come from that. That 3, 4, maybe 5, but like that kind of 2.5 to 5-year-old age span is where a majority of your income is going to be coming from. And so if you take out all 4-year-olds, all you really have are 2.5 to 3. And that's just a large amount of their income. So, I'm listening to them talk about this, and also as they're rolling out, TK universally, they've lumped it within the school district. So in order to teach it, you need, I think is it a multi-subject or a single? I think it's a multi-subject. Or maybe it's a single subject teach.
It's a multi.
The multi? Okay.
And then you need the you need the ECE certification too for TK.
Okay. And so,
because I remember I was like, but they were like, do you want to do TK? And I checked the box, and then they called me and they were like, you didn't get your ECE. And I was like, oh, I can. Right.
Gotcha. On it.
Yeah. I meant next year I would do it.
Yes. Which is like a great thing that they've added on it for like how they've rolled it out now. But that also means that it excludes all of the early childhood educators who, lots of us have degrees, and lots of us have been teaching 3 and 4-year-olds for years. And so it kind of excluded this large group of people who were already doing the thing that you're asking for. And the school district obviously is going to pay more money, obviously, than early childhood is going to pay us. And so, but it just kind of cut out all these early childhood educators who are really knowledgeable in this age group. And no one was really asked about this, about like what would make sense, for someone to teach TK, like what would make sense for that. And there was no collaboration. And so the rollout has just been chaotic, to say the least. And so it's just been, but I do love that. Like, I was going to ask you about that, because teaching, it is political. And, as we're working within communities, we're working with young students. And I always say that advocacy, there's a lot of ways that we can advocate. And one of those ways is being in the classroom is its own form of advocacy. It's its own form of working directly with people, working directly with students. And it's a beautiful thing, but at the same time, it's really hard and it's really tricky.
Yeah, it really is. And I found that, I was really into advocacy, like when I was in the classroom, of course, because that's kind of one of the reasons I ended up in education, because that's where I feel like I'm most useful in like my advocacy work. But when I left, I realized I was also able to speak up in a totally different way than I was before, because I didn't have to look over my shoulder wondering if I'm going to get fired or have somebody call my job for advocating or for being involved in activism, especially on the internet.
Yes.
So that's nice. So that's the one upside of not being in the classroom, where I'm like, you know what, I'm able to advocate in this way, and then when I go back, I'll be able to advocate in that way. And like, there's just always a place. And I think there's also a place for parents, and there's a place for parents and teachers to work together, and things like that. Like, there's just a spot for everyone. And if public education matters to you and social justice is something that's on your mind, there's a way to get involved, and
Yes.
you just kind of have to find the right spot for you,
Yes.
you know?
Yes. And I love that. There are so many different avenues that one can utilize their voice, especially within education. Because as we know, it is so important, and we care about it so deeply, and the children deserve for us to care about it, and they deserve an education system that works for them and is in their best interest. So all these different ways that we can advocate is so important. So whether that is online and talking at people online, or showing up at these school board meetings, or even like running for school board, like we need more
Oh, yeah.
representation on there. It's surprisingly not that difficult to.
No, I just did a campaign with Run for Something, and they put out a whole toolkit for people who want to run for school board. And I was even
Yes.
so surprised by some of the numbers and statistics that they threw out, just
Hmm.
like it is, like you said, it's easier than anticipated.
Yeah, yeah, because you think it's so like it's hard. Like no, it's kind of a little bit easier. Like there's work to do, but um,
Yeah.
you can do it, and that's another way of advocating, especially for early childhood, because there's not usually a lot of representation of early childhood on school boards. And when we're talking about the TK rollout, and we're talking about potentially doing all 3-year-olds, we kind of do need someone within the school district and within you know our school boards to be like, hey, have we really thought about this? Like, I know it's happening at this larger level, at a state level, but we could make noise. We can make noise in numbers. The more of us who are saying
Yes.
and just being loud and annoying and being like, hey, no, um they do eventually listen to it.
Yes. And in 2024, there are over 20,000 school board seats up for reelection.
Wow.
And nearly 40% of those are seats that are won in uncontested races. So just like people
Wow.
that are running for their same seat again.
Hmm.
What would they do if they had a little challenger? I don't know.
Yes.
Maybe you would win. Like
Yes.
don't count yourself out.
Exactly, exactly. Especially for early childhood educators. If you're out there and you're looking for ways to just be a part and be active in your community, another way is to look at those school boards. Look at it. Maybe you run.
Yes.
Maybe we go to the meetings. They're usually in the afternoons, so that's kind of nice that they're not having school board
Right.
meetings in the middle of the day. But they're usually, at least the ones that I've been to, have been in the kind of afternoon, evening time, so like after work time. um, it's
Yeah.
exhausting if you are in the classroom to then try to go to a school board meeting and try to be active. Like, it is exhausting because you're already exhausted from being in the classroom and using your voice in that particular way. But if you do have the time and space
Mhm.
to do it, it is such a worthy thing to go towards.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes, yes. And so when we're thinking about education and the future of education, how do you reimagine education? What does that look like for you?
I was thinking about this question, and I feel like I always now have to put it in the context of a post 2020 world, because
Mm,
when teaching during the pandemic, it really underscored so many of the existing inequities in education. So it's, for me, really important to think about the approach we're taking in that lens, because the world now is just so different than it was in February of 2020.
yep.
But I think for me, like, I always go back to wanting to give students a choice filled future, not necessarily
Mm,
college bound or, oh, I'm going to be X, Y, or Z. I think having the choice is something that's really
mm,
important for me, for our students. And I think if we're reimagining the education system, we should be allowing students to be curious, foster their critical thinking skills, and be creative. And um, having an environment that's not just so uh, focused on standardized testing and those
mm,
outcomes, but instilling in students a love of learning that's like bigger than the education system. And I know
yes.
that sounds so like sunshine and rainbowsy, but I do think that it's really important. And I do think that that would be critical to the world that we live in now, especially because to get there, we have to address issues of accessibility and inclusion and holistic development. Like, to get to that ultimate goal, it has to be very intersectional and include all of our kids, and not, oh, well, these kids are in this zip code, so they get X, Y, or Z opportunities. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So that's kind of where I go when I think about that question.
And I love it because I think when we think about reimagining education and we think about reimagining the future, it should be sunshine and rainbows and sunflowers.
Right.
You know, like it should be like this is what we're aspiring to because, you know, kids should feel comfortable in school and they should be encouraged to be curious about, you know, their environment and curious about what's going on around them. And especially because like they're the ones who have to deal with the future that we're leaving them. So yeah, they should be active participants in that and should also be able to dream and also be able to be active participants in their learning and be able to have choice. I think we often unintentionally take away that choice, and we often unintentionally take away their dreams and their fire in so many different ways throughout, you know, throughout the education process. And that's not what it's supposed to be for. that's that's not how
Right.
it's supposed to be. And so I love when we're just thinking about just aspirational, and I love that you mentioned that it should be intersectional, right? Because if we're trying to dream of the world as it should be, and we are leaving people behind, we're never gonna get there, right?
Exactly.
Like we need the liberation of all of us in order for us to all get to that place where we are all happy, thriving, and we're living a life of dignity and choice and all these great things. It's important that we're looking at that intersectionality. We're looking at the all these beautiful things that diversity and equity and inclusion bring to our world.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. So where can my audience find you? Is there anything that you would like to tell us about or anything you'd like to promote going forward?
No, I mean, you can find me on anything as Mrs. Frazzled, and I'm there. Thank you so much for having me, Brittany.
Thank you so much for coming on and talking to me about just social justice things and education. And thank you for just being your authentic self on the internet. It is so inspiring and beautiful, and it has inspired me to just want to continue to advocate and continue to know that even if I'm not in the classroom, I can still be an advocate. And yeah, so I just appreciate you, being yourself on the internet, and coming on and talking to me about my favorite thing, education and social justice.
Thanks for having me on to talk about my favorite things. Thank you.
Of
You're the
course.
best, Brittany. Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
so much. Thank you so much for tuning in to Conscious Pathways. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to Conscious Pathways wherever you get your podcast. And don't forget to read a late rating or review. It really does help the podcast to find more listeners just like you. And until next time, don't forget to navigate your conscious journey with courage and kindness. And I'll see you then for more transformative conversations. Bye!